There's a bit of moving backwards and forwards. He's trying to swing his knife. I've got the narwhal tusk, and I managed to stab him in the neck. It was obvious to me that it was a terrorist attack. It looked like an improvised explosive belt strapped around his waist. I'm sort of questioning my sanity, and that's probably partly why I went blank, because this is my first day out of prison, you know, and I'm chasing a terrorist out on London Bridge. My name's Steve Gallant. In 2005, I was convicted of murder and sentenced to life. On my first day out of prison, I took down a terrorist on London Bridge. This is my story. I was born and raised in Hull, which is a city up in the north on the east coast, a working class city. I have quite a big family. We all lived on council estates, and life seemed to be quite fun at the time. I never felt unloved by my parents. Yeah, life was good, it seemed good, but there was a darker edge to my life and to my community, and that was violence. Violence seemed to be everywhere for some reason. That had an impact on me, had an impact on my thinking and my behaviour. I had a stepfather who was also violent, and when I messed around, he used violence to deal with me, and that instilled in me this idea that it was okay to use violence to resolve issues. As I grew a little bit older, I started to hang around with like-minded kids who also struggled at school and were probably slapped around by their parents too. And together we ventured onto the streets and eventually took some of our issues and our problems and the trouble that we were causing into the bars and the clubs around Hull, where we continued getting into trouble, getting into fights, resolving issues with violence. But so by the time I'd reached about 17, I was going to the pubs and clubs around Hull, and I realised that it was a lifestyle that couldn't be sustained by shoplifting and stuff like that. So I managed to get myself a job, and I settled into a more stable pattern of work. And then a couple of years later, I got myself into a relationship. I met a girl and started to settle down a little bit. Despite moving away from some of the minor crimes that I committed as a kid, some of the violence remained. I met a lovely lady called Jane who brought a bit of stability to my life, and we were together probably for about 5.5 years. My lifestyle, going out with my friends, drinking a lot, started to take its toll on my relationship. So I decided to move out to my mother's for a short while. And it was whilst I was living at my mother's that I received a phone call saying that my partner had been attacked in my home. It turns out that somebody had walked into our home and attacked her and her friends with a hammer and other implements. There was 3 people. It was essentially an aggravated burglary. As she'd opened the door, she was struck in the face with this hammer, and she had a big gash on her forehead. So it was quite a vicious attack. My partner and her friends thought they'd recognised under the face coverings one of the perpetrators of that attack. And this was a local chap who was well known for his own violence. I believed through information locally and through what was coming through that he had been responsible. It wasn't, of course, my place to take that on and deal with it. The police had been informed, and they had the identity of that person, but he'd not been arrested. 9 days later, I'm out drinking with my friends, and I go to a local pub, one that I don't usually go to, but I thought I'd go there for last orders, and it turned out that the person who I allegedly attacked my partner was inside the pub drinking. I made the fateful decision to wait outside the pub for him to come out and approach him. And it was there that we engaged in quite a violent struggle, where he eventually ran off down the road, was hit by my friend in his van. He was knocked unconscious, and we proceeded to attack him. The next day, after I'd gone to one of my friends to stay for the evening, I was informed through the radio that he'd died. So suddenly I was wanted for taking somebody's life. When the foreman cried guilty to murder, I kept my composure, and I did that because I didn't want my family to worry about me. Of course, I knew what it meant. It was serious. I knew, that there was a real chance that I could stay in prison for a very long time, if not forever. I thought it was important to keep composed, focused, and just keep my mind and keep my sanity during that time, because I think it's very easy to go off on a wrong track. Some people take drugs, some people don't come out of their cell It can affect people in very different ways, but for me it was just about sticking to those promises that I'd made about not using violence, educate myself, and I felt that if I wanted to get my freedom back, really get my freedom back, and get anything like a normal life back, that I had to stick to those things and see them through. So that's what I did. I made some very strong decisions about that. About 12 months after I was convicted, I was then shipped out to a prison called H&P Frankland, which is a cat prison in the north of England. I'd heard stories about Frankland and about the type of people who were there, so I turned up there expecting the worst. However, it was quite calm when I was there and quite settled, and I thought that was unusual. But I soon became aware that that calmness was just a perception. Underlying the environment within prisons, there's a lot of volatility. You get some very dangerous people in those places who are quite calm. When they flip or when they go off it or when a fight happens, it goes off big time. Violence seems to be on a different level in those places. There was a lot of people there who I'd seen in the papers, you know, gangsters, criminals, all sorts of people who you don't think you're ever going to meet. You know, they're not the sort of people you cross, that's for sure. So at one point in my sentence, I was then moved to a prison called H&P Warren Hill, a cat prison in Suffolk, which was quite progressive and open. And it was there that I met laying together. And one of their group was a young chap called Jack Merritt. He was very inspirational, lovely guy, and he'd been working with prisoners to try and motivate them, educate them and stuff like that. I spent a lot of time with them, I spent a lot of time with Jack. There was bringing in speakers from Cambridge University, you know, professors of law and stuff like that. So it was a really interesting, very useful time for me. Because of that relationship that I built with laying together, when I eventually moved on to an open prison, I was only in the open prison about a week or so, I'd received an invite to Laying Together's 5-year celebration event, which was going to be held at Fishmongers Hall on London Bridge. So of course I gladly accepted that invite. There was just one little problem. I had to apply for it and I was actually rejected. The prison said, we don't have enough staff to take you there, because to go somewhere like that, especially on your first day out of prison, you would normally need an escort with you. Fortunately, somebody from Laying Together contacted the prison and we got that done. She managed to convince them to allow me to go. So they found someone to eventually take me. I've been cooped up for 14.5 years by then, and my first taste of freedom was travelling into London, on London Bridge, to this beautiful building, which is full of great people, it's opulent surroundings, very, very smart, and just a really exciting time for me. So it was a real buzz to be at Fishmongers Hall on that day, on that morning, and the sun was shining too. Made my way upstairs, where I was greeted by some of my Laying Together friends. There's already people there, just drinking fresh juice and eating fish pie, and Jack Merritt came to greet me, gave me a hug, and so did the other Laying Together teams. So it was just a really nice atmosphere, and there was a real buzz about the place. Almost, you know, what next? You know, where we're going to go with this next? I could see the Shard in the background from the window of Fishmongers Hall across the River Thames. It just looked beautiful, so beautiful in fact. The officer who was with me, he got his phone out and took a picture of it. After a while, I was then invited into the banqueting hall, where there's loads of tables set out, and there was a stage and there was a presentation. And I remember there was another lady, American lady, wearing I think a red dress, and she got up and she did a talk on ideas and how, let's say someone says something to you which is, I don't know, calls you an idiot when you're a kid. Sometimes that can impact people, how they think about themselves as they grow older. They might grow up thinking they're an idiot, for example. Prior to that moment, I'd noticed an Asian chap near the window. I'm not sure why, but I had clocked him, but I never thought no more of it. And it was the same chap who responded to this presenter's questions, and it turned out to be Usman Khan, this person. And he said, I was hanging around with some friends before, and they were thinking in the wrong way, and I told them they were thinking in the wrong way. From that, I got the impression that perhaps he was previously maybe was a gang member, or or maybe something else, and that he in the past he was antisocial, and now he was thinking more antisocial, and he was telling his friends that they should think more social, more pro-socially. So I had quite a positive view of his response. After about a couple of hours into this event, there was a break, and I was invited into another room where Jack was, and we took some pictures and stuff like that. And a short while later, there was a call to go back into the event, and people started to come back in and settle down. And as they did so, we heard screams. And at first I remember thinking, oh, is that somebody messing around? I mean, even someone giggled or made a joke about it. And then those screams continued, and it seemed unlikely that it was somebody messing around. As they continued, the escort, the prison officer who was with me, turned around and said to me, "Stay there," as he went to go and investigate. So I was under orders to stay put. And of course I didn't want to go and investigate at that time or make any mistakes because I was out on licence my first day and I didn't want to mess up. A few seconds later, one of the co-founders of Laying Together came rushing into the room saying, "Everybody stay there, it's Usman," and pressing her phone really fast. So I thought, well, whoever's this Usman is, he must be responsible for these screams. It just made logical sense. I just thought, as the screams were continuing, I thought, sod it, I best go and investigate. So I just jumped up, made my way out of the banqueting hall and towards where I heard the screams coming, which was downstairs. As I got to the bottom of the stairs, I saw Saskia Jones laid at the bottom of the stairs with blood coming from her neck, and the officer who had been with me holding her neck and trying to stem the flow of the blood. And then I looked to the side and I saw another young lady in a fetal position, lots of blood underneath her. She wasn't moving either. And then I looked forward and I saw Usman Khan stood there with two big sharp knives in each hand. And it was obvious that this man was responsible for what I'd just seen. So at that point I made the decision to engage him, either take him to the ground or just keep him occupied until the police arrived. It was obvious to me that it was a terrorist attack. I'd seen a lot of violence in the prison system, and it was clear that this man needed to be stopped immediately because he was on the rampage. So I looked to my side and there's a piece of wood on the floor, so I picked up that piece of wood and I just launched it towards his head. It missed. By now he's obviously aware that I'm focused on him, so he opened up his jacket and showed me what looked like an improvised explosive belt strapped around his waist. Quite a big thing it was. But I wasn't fazed by that. For some reason I just thought it's fake. Of course I didn't know, but that's what I made that assumption. But I'm unarmed now and he's facing me, but I looked to my side and there was a chap stood next to me holding out a narwhal tusk. So I just took it. I went into this foyer where Usman was stood and I just went for him. You can see me coming now. We're now in a position where there's a bit of moving backwards and forwards. He's trying to swing his knife, so I've got the narwhal tusk and I managed to stab him in the neck or the chest quite high up here. Seemed to have little effect and I hit him hard as well. He then comes running at me again and we're back again, and I managed to snap the narwhal tusk over him this time. I think it's his shoulder, it snaps in half. And then I've got no weapon on me at all. He comes running at me, but I back out the room. I just remember saying to myself, just get back in there, keep on him. So I've gone back down. This time I've managed to pick up a chair and I've smashed the chair over him. It's raced towards the exit, which takes you out to London Bridge. And someone shut the door behind him. So I thought, well, there's people out there who don't have a clue about what's about to hit them. So I raced over, I said, move, there's people out there. I pulled the door open and then I went out onto London Bridge and immediately seen some ladies walking towards him. I just shouted, "Get back, he's a terrorist, get back." And thankfully they must have looked at me, looked at him and realised what was going on, and they backed away. And then Usman must have been frustrated by me. He's then come back towards me up the stairs with his knives. And these knives were 8-inch razor sharp knives, and they were both strapped to his hands with duct tape, so they wasn't easy to remove. And I've tried to hit him, we've had another engagement, somehow he's managed to get the narwhal tusk off me and throw it back at me. It's only when I feel a cold sensation hit my arm that my memory comes back, and that was the cold wet spray from a fire extinguisher from John Crilly, who'd come rushing out with his fire extinguisher and tried to spray Usman and hit my arm. Usman suddenly turned and started running towards London Bridge, and by then another guy had come out. This was the guy who originally handed me a narwhal tusk. He came out with a second narwhal tusk and he ran down the stairs and he's now chased after Usman Khan. John Crilly has followed him with the fire extinguisher, and then I've followed them too. I'm sort of questioning my sanity, and that's probably partly why I went blank, because this is my first day out of prison, you know, and I'm chasing a terrorist out of London Bridge, and I did question momentarily, have I lost my mind, possibly on the first day out? But because of other people involved, I managed to sort of hold on to the fact that there's other people involved in this, other people chased him, it's probably real. It was unusually sunny for a November daytime as well. For a November, no clouds in the sky, the sun was shining, but it's quite low, and it was striking across London Bridge, which made the atmosphere seem even more surreal. But enough of me knew that I just had to stay focused enough to stop this guy. So as we chased him onto London Bridge, I remember just saying to myself, while we're messing around, just grab him and take him to the ground. So eventually, as I reached him, I managed to just get hold of his jacket, grip it enough to just swing him and pull him down to the ground, where I then dropped on top of him and shouted to the other two, grab his hands, grab his hands. And I remember seeing the police now pulling up, this was armed police, jumping out the cars with their guns and shouting, get back, armed police, get back, fucking move, and all this lot. So I still had hold of Usman, I had quite a firm grip on him, and I thought I'll just let people peel away. So after a while, people started to peel away. Somebody shouted bomb, and then people moved away even quicker, and then I was just left with me and the other chap who had the narwhal tusk holding on to Usman Khan. And I just remember thinking, it's finished. As I backed away, by the time I'd got to where I wanted to get, I turned around. The other chap had been moved off. I think the police had pulled him off, and I heard a couple of shots, and Usman had been shot twice. But as I turned, after those shots, he tried to get to his feet, which surprised me because, you know, he'd been hit with narwhal tusk, taken down, we'd been fighting for a long time, and then he'd been shot twice, and yet he still tried to get to his feet. Then he was shot again and tasered in the head, and from there he dropped back down. He was shot again later on. I heard another 13 shots go into him. He'd obviously been dealt with, you know, he was no longer a danger, so I made my way back to Fishmongers Hall, started to process those thoughts and what had just happened, but there was another quite overwhelming thought that I had in my mind. I'd realised that was my first act of violence in 14 and a half years too. It was still profound to me that I had managed to navigate my way through a full sentence, surrounded by violence, and yet resist that. It's also obviously a terrible, terrible time, because I didn't really know at the time, but Jack Merritt, my mentor, had also been attacked, and a short while later he lost his life, and I found that out the next day. I also found out that Saskia Jones had died as well. Jack and Saskia, two people who had done all the, you know, such amazing things to help people like Usman Khan, had now lost their lives in pursuit of their dreams by somebody that was helping. My MP had stood up in Parliament, a Carl Turner MP, and asked Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister, to congratulate and pay tribute to me. And Boris did. He stood up in Parliament and praised me. But he also gave Carl his word that he would do all he can to help me. I didn't know about it at the time. When we realised that the other process was really slow and unlikely to happen anytime soon, Carl, alongside a lawyer called John Samuels, KC, in fact he's a retired judge, got together and wrote a letter to Boris asking him to stick to his pledge to help me and do all he can. A week later, I was given the Royal Prerogative of Mercy and had 10 months knocked off my minimum tariff of 17 years. So it didn't mean I was to be released early, it meant that I would be able to apply for parole 10 months earlier than I would normally have. We then applied for parole a little bit earlier, and I was given that parole and released. And when I got told that I was going to receive the Queen's Gallant Medal, of course I was really happy about that. You know, it's just like the Royal Prerogative of Mercy. It's not something I can sort of celebrate in the normal sense of the word. People lost lives, and it's always got that dark element hanging over it. But for me personally, Queen's Gallantry Medal in particular doesn't just represent bravery, it represents change. This was given to me by the highest authority in the land. If I was still messing around, if I was still committing offences, if my record was terrible, I doubt very much they would have trusted me and give me that award. It just wouldn't have happened. So that really was, in some ways, their nod to say, actually, we think you've done okay in this area too. That's why, for me, it represents change as well, and change which I think can be, used to sort of achieve some of my objectives of motivating people, inspiring people who, like me, have made mistakes, just need to know that actually, if put a shift in, put the effort in, they too can you know, get their lives back and give something back, not just wallow in self-pity, a place where they might go back to violence or go back to the problems that brought them to the prison in the first place. So it was a big thing for me in terms of using the symbolism of that medal to do good things.